better at it.
All right. Finally, the time has come that I get to be the veteran in a book chat, and it's great. And I have Derri here, who is used to being the veteran, but she now, today, tonight, whatever time you're watching this, is the rookie, because we will be discussing one of my favorite books of all time, The Bear and the Nightingale by Katherine Arden.
Yeah.
I'm so excited. This would be a really awkward time for you to say, actually, JK, I hated it. So,
Okay.
how did
For the record, I did not hate it.
Okay, good.
Okay. Because obviously I have my copy because my lovely fairy book godmother, Evie, sent me this beautiful copy. And I read it over the space, I want to say of 2 days, but really it was in the space of about 26 hours. Where I read it over one night and then I got up very early the next morning and finished it the next morning. And when I say I was up late that night reading it, Evie can attest, I voxed her at 2:45 in the morning, telling her that I'm putting the book down now and I'm loving it. And I'd finished by 9:30 the next morning. So yes, I'm a fan. I enjoyed it tremendously. So thank you so much for A, introducing it to me, and B, the beautiful copy that I have. So thank you for reciprocating the love of a series, because I know the joy of that.
Yes, it makes me so happy. And
Yeah.
And the narrator said she let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. And I was so I wanted you to love this book so much. I want you to love this series so much because you've helped me, you've guided me along the wonder that is the realm of the Elderlings, and I love the realm of the Elderlings so much. And I love the Winternight trilogy, and I was hoping, I was like, oh, please, God, let Derri at least like it. And that you love it is just, it makes me so happy.
Yeah.
And
I do know the joy, I do. And that fear of somebody that you just really want them to love it, and you're like, oh God, please love it. And I went into it knowing almost nothing, that it was just this Russian-based fairy tale dark thing, and that you loved it. That was really all I knew about it. And that was enough for me to go, okay, I will probably at least like it.
Yeah.
And I'd read Spinning Silver a year or so ago by Naomi Novik, which again, that dark themed Russian winter fairy tale thing, which I loved. So this was exactly the book to go into, wanting more of that, because it's that but deeper, if that makes sense, and that there's more depth to it in terms of family history and the interweaving with the fairy tales that exist around them. And it was just exactly what I wanted after reading Spinning Silver. I was like, that's what I want more of, because I loved that. And this, I was like, oh, this hits the spot.
I'm just gonna sit here and let you gush about it. And I'll just
okay.
I
loved it. I really did.
So
the names were the difficult thing for me, because everybody's got so many different names, and I think it will probably take me at least another couple of reads to get familiar with it, so that I feel comfortable that I know exactly who's being talked about, or two. But I know I'm going to read it at least that many times, so that's fine.
So going back to Spinning Silver, I haven't read Spinning Silver, but from what I've heard, and please correct me if I'm mistaken, it is very much a fantasy. It's
very much.
Okay. Whereas The Bear and the Nightingale, there are fantastical elements, but it is very much when you reference to like more the deeperness, the depth of it.
Yes,
there's a lot of history in this,
and it's very definitively placed in time. Like you can picture this in a moment in time. It's set in a real place as such. Mm-hmm. Like you can imagine where it is on the map, and you can imagine how everybody in it is interacting, because we know how the social structure in Russia, or as much as anybody Western who's never lived in Russia can know, how that social structure works, and who's responsible for who, and that kind of carry on. So yes, and I think that's what gives it that sense of depth, that yes, this has roots, this is embedded in a culture somewhere. And I love that so much. I really do. Because it's expected that you know about these particular spirits or forces, because everybody did. And it doesn't hold your hand through that, which I like, because it feels like it's familiar. And I like that's what I love. So.
I'm just going to keep saying, I'm so happy that you love it.
Yeah, it is hard when you love it. You're like, yay, because yay is all you can think of for the first while, and you're like, tell me more of what you loved. And so yeah, I loved it. I loved that she was this really what's the tropey kind of girl that doesn't fit in, and really tropey kind of wild child, and really tropey sort of half orphaned child, and it was all very tropey, but then it was not at all tropey, because her family loved her.
Not a separation at a point. It's simultaneously tropey, but not tropey.
Yeah. So. And then that, I think, it makes it really comforting to read, because you're familiar with all of those things. And so to watch them being done in a way that doesn't feel the same as anything else is incredibly comforting. I mean, here's this girl who's her mother dies having her, and yet her family love her, and she's treated.
By the way,
it's beautiful.
Full spoilers. Just I'll put it in the description. I'll put them.
Sorry, yeah. But yeah, I'm used to full spoilers.
Listen, if you're here on my channel watching this video,
you probably.
Yeah.
And it's not a big spoiler, really, to be fair.
No. Yeah.
So
it literally happens in the first chapter of the book. So
yeah. So, but yeah, it was. I just really loved it, and I loved the variation in the people in her family, because anyone who's got even more than one sibling knows that that's true. Mm-hmm. That you have siblings that love each other dearly and don't agree on anything.
Yeah,
they have different ways of expressing their emotions. They have different goals. They've got different objectives in life. Everybody's really different, but they still really care about each other. And even as the story progresses and you see her brothers get older and actually go and do their own thing, they still come back when the family needs them. And I just really loved that, because we don't get a lot of that in fantasy, where the family still remains a family. Often it's, the orphan or the abandoned child or whatever, and it's a found family. This is, no, she actually gets to have her family around her the whole time, which is lovely.
So to my very probably poor attempt to put some structure onto this, I guess let's start at the beginning. How did you feel, or what was your experience kind of starting? I know you said you knew nothing about it other than I don't shut up about it. But what was your experience kind of going into it and experiencing really that like kind of first chapter? What was your take on that?
I thought it was a perfect setting up chapter, because it's so descriptive, where you literally have this old lady sitting by the oven in the deepest winter in Russia, telling stories to the young children and their joy at their mama coming home. And yet the comfort of, yes, now we're all home and we're all sitting around the fire and we're all listening to the story. And I'm an experienced enough reader to go, okay, the story is foreshadowing. So I'm listening to the story that the old lady is telling, going, oh, this is going to be good. And obviously it was. But just that brings you, anchors you really firmly in the heart of this home, being around, because it's Russia and it's mostly set in winter. So sitting around this oven is where you spend a lot of the book, interacting in the kitchen and having the stories told, and all of the emotive moments happen in this room. And it really anchors you there with this sensation of family and togetherness and warmth while you're surrounded by freezing cold, that this is your survival. This unit here is what's going to get you through. And I thought that was just a perfect opening as far as tone and vibes. People often say, it's a vibes book. It is a vibes book, but there's way more to it. And I loved it. I loved the magicalness of it while it was being so grounded, because it's freezing and they're having cabbage soup because it's the middle of winter and that's what there is.
Yeah.
And perfect beginning to a book. Absolutely perfect.
And then a very quick but slow segue to introducing more of the family, Marina, Piotr, and you don't even see Vasya as the main character until until later. But it's really a story
situation.
It's truly a story of her even before she was born. Her mother wanting her. What are your perceptions of Marina and her what do you call it? Just knowing what is going to happen to her, like the risks she's willing to take with Vasya.
I think with Marina, with the story that we get at the beginning, with our fairy tale, and then the little glimpses you get from Piotr as to who Marina is, and that she's not a Russian peasant. She's not the girl next door. She's already got this air of mystery to her, that she's out of place in this home. She's chosen it to be her home, and she's given it 100% of her love, and she's committed to being in this family, but that she doesn't necessarily belong. And so she's already the fish out of water in here, in this situation. So there's a sense of magical around Marina, and Piotr values that about her. Like, he treasures her. He appreciates that she is something incredibly special. And when she tells him, well, I'm going to have another child, he worries. He's like, oh, that might be one too many. And she's like, well, I'm having her. It's going to be a daughter, and she's going to be of my line. She's not going to be another addition to your grounded family. She's going to be mine. And so you immediately know that this daughter that she's going to have, because you believe her, you're like, okay, because you know that she's somehow special and she's magical. You believe that, yes, she knows that she's pregnant. Yes, she knows she's going to have a daughter. And yes, she knows her daughter will be different. So you're set up expecting something from this child because she's set up that way.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't come as a surprise when we meet Vasilia, and she's such a, I think in European terms, we would call it touched. She's wild. She has a connection outside of the norm. Mm-hmm. And it's wonderful when we do get to meet her, knowing that she was very deliberately chosen to exist by her mother. And it was great. But because she was chosen by Marina, Piotr accepts her. He does resent her to some degree, because he knows that his wife chose to have her and his wife was lost in having her. So there is a resentment there, but he tries very hard to overcome that, because his wife wanted her so much. But nobody in the family is surprised by this odd child that is suddenly in their home.
And there's hold on, let me backtrack. Trying to gather my thoughts, because I'm trying to say something without spoiling anything. So, because I'm trying to go linearly here through the story, with also not spoiling stuff in the future.
Yes.
But so as I've read this many times, and I've read a lot of interviews, watched a lot of interviews with Katherine Arden, the author has mentioned that she wanted to take a fairy tale and really flesh it out. So you have this kind of the fairy tale aspect of this chosen one, I suppose, in Vasya. And you have this father who, there's no mother figure in her life other than Dunya, arguably. So Peter kind of, he realizes, oh crap, 6 years, 7 years later, 8 years later, however long it was, that, oh crap, I guess I need to go find a wife. But he's not intentionally going, well, he is going to kind of look for a wife. But there's that kind of parallel of the magical, where he gets he meets Morosko, which actually, let me even backtrack even further. What is your perceptions of that initial meeting of Vasya with the one-eyed man? And
that was beautiful foreshadowing. That really was, and that we have her being utterly familiar with the forest and the woods around her home, because you've already figured out by now this kid, she's pretty onto it, and for her to not know where she is in these woods around her home is really unusual. So okay, she's magically somewhere. This doesn't have to explicitly tell you. You're just like, oh, okay, she's on another level, plane, I don't know. She's in a magic world at this moment. And you've got a sleeping man sort of shifting about, but kind of waking up in response to her. And you're like, oh, okay, so we're getting the beginning of whatever friction is going to come. And then we get, after she gets out of the circle, we get the sort of that mystery bit that you'd get at the end of an episode with somebody on the outskirts who's watched it going, oh, he's waking up. So you're like, oh, okay, here are our two forces. And not knowing anything about Russian folklore or fairy tale tradition, I still at that point wasn't entirely sure what they represented or who they were. But I was like, okay, but those are our people. I don't know which is good and which is bad, because it's a fairy tale. One of them's going to be good and one of them's going to be bad. But it was enough mystery for me to go, oh, okay, pay attention to those ones. And then, as you say, when Piotr goes to the city to win a bride, and he encounters, I can't think of the name now, Morosko, and it's a very magical encounter in that it's in an area full of people and nobody but him remembers it, and he's given this charm to give to his daughter. You're like, oh, okay, this is where we kick off. This is the beginning, because this force, whatever this force is, and at this point I still wasn't sure what it was, but it's clearly winter related given the injuries to the son. You're like, okay, so we're looking probably, I wasn't certain, probably at some kind of winter king or winter spirit, winter personification, anthropomorphic personification. Thank you, Terry Pratchett. And so you're getting that connection, and then you can see when he comes home, he's got the charm. He doesn't want to give it to his daughter. His daughter is a child. She's got the attention of this winter entity. He's worried. He loves his daughter. He doesn't want to give her the thing. So he gives her charm to Dunya instead. And she starts dreaming, because this winter personification is like, can you be giving this charm to the person I wanted it to go to? And she keeps in the dream going, but she's a child, she's a child, she's a child. And so you then get a sense of dread, because you're like, oh, but there was a reason that the Winter King wanted a connection to this girl, and that's being delayed. So what is that delay doing? What are we seeing as a result of that delay? And so it just builds beautifully into that steady build of tension in the story once we bring in that the next sort of thing, which is the religious sort of aspect to it. But it was just so well paced. Like you just sort of got given then enough hint as you went along to build the story. It was great. Loved it.
Yeah, I was actually gonna be like, at the same time as all this is happening, we have this historical aspect of it, of bringing in the historicity of medieval Russia, and then Pyotr doesn't get to choose his bride. He has Anna foisted on him. What did you think of Anna?
I felt really sorry for Anna because we're introduced to her and she's very frightened because she can see demons as she perceives them. But she's grown up in the city, away from a lot of folklore, away from tradition, and she's been given this new world mindset of God and Jesus and Christian, Orthodox church narrative. So these spirits that she's seeing are devils, they're demons. And she's frightened because she sees them everywhere. And everybody thinks she's insane. So, which is why they want to marry her off. And I just felt really sorry for her. I was like, oh, darling, I'm sure there's more to this. And only when she finally comes back to Pyotr's home do we see those devils and demons from Vasia's perspective. And that's when you learn that, no, these were the traditional spirits of homes and houses in Russia. These are the ones that defended them from the wicked and the dangerous. That this was how they maintained the spirits of their homes. Mm-hmm. And so I just felt really sad for Anna because when she finally got into a situation where her ability to see them could have been incredibly valuable, she believes she's insane, so she doesn't tell anyone, and it just makes her even more crazy because they're everywhere. Yeah. And I just felt really sorry for her. And
so to kind of go into the philosophical thematic stuff of it, a lot of the critiques that, or I should say the most frequent critique that I have seen of The Bear and the Nightingale is people getting so turned off or dare I say offended by the depiction of religion and its perception that religion is bad. And I would argue that it's not religion, it is the fear that religion invokes. And it's not just religion, it's really just fear.
And it is fear. And when we look at when we meet the monk that's forced to go to the village, Constantine, he's very much that incredibly charismatic leader who happens to be incredibly talented, and he is fallen into the church. And like a lot of obsessive people, they often attach themselves to the most extreme form of something, whether that's musicianship or artistry or religion in this instance. But it wasn't the religion that was the problem. It was the obsession that Constantine formed around Vasia and wanting the adoration of the people around him because he felt he had a calling. We learn that he's being influenced by this negative entity, and the creation of fear, which is the easiest way for anybody to control a group of people, which is what Constantine immediately does upon arriving at the village. Fear is what feeds this entity. So it becomes this mutually sustaining cycle between a really negative force and this person who believes that their own passion, their own power is God-fueled, when it's really an obsessive personality being fed by a lot of energy. So I never saw it so much as the religion being at fault, but religion was the doorway that allowed that individual into what had been a reasonably harmonious little community. Yeah. But while yes, there is a religious element, I never saw it as any kind of negative. Yeah. No.
Yeah, I mean, because Vasia's village.
Sasha, I mean,
Yeah,
her brother is incredibly religious, and he's incredibly kind, and he's incredibly caring, and we very much get the sense that he is God touched, that he does have a calling to the church. So you do get that two sides of the coin, this really kind, beautiful, forgiving person who's called to the church for belief in that church, and this charismatic bloke who uses the church. So it's clear for me that no, it wasn't any kind of judgment on religion.
As opposed to, well, I mean, there is the new religion versus the old religion of this Christianity versus paganism.
Yeah.
But more than anything, for a modern reader, speaking for myself, and I would imagine you would agree, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. It is more about fear. I should say it's more about power versus faith, and how fear can control, can it sway people.
Very much so.
And
But we see that with cults all over the world. Mm-hmm. And cult leaders are, like Constantine is portrayed. He's very charismatic. He's very much into creating a cult of personality, if you like, which is what they do. And often it becomes fear. You do things my way, or terrible things happen. And terrible things are beginning to happen in this village. The more frightened they are, and the more the power of this other being is coming into its strength, because the protections offered by these traditional house domestic spirits are no longer being worshipped. They're not being fed. So the belief, the fear, the faith, rather, the belief that strengthens these house spirits has faded away. So they're weakening. And so the more frightened these people become, the weaker their protections become, and the more dominant the fear becomes. And it becomes this self-sustaining cycle. And it's heartbreaking to watch because you can see it happening and you're like, oh no, no, go back to the way things were traditional, because often these are the fairy tales. That's what they're trying to tell you, is live in a traditional way, live in harmony with where you are, which is where you get this historic resistance to the church, which told you everybody had to behave the same way, this prescribed behavior, which had nothing to do with religion and had everything to do with control. And to have that diminish the way cultures interacted with their own environments and how they kept those environments harmonious is what I think is far more on display. Because in behaving in a way that is prescribed by people who have never lived in those areas, they're literally starving themselves in times of plenty and not able to produce a harvest good enough to see them through winter. And like, it's genuinely harming them, having this control by people who don't understand that, no, there's a reason these people live this way. And yeah, I really like that aspect of it, because it's easy to just take it that step below this, the on paper story, and actually look at what it's showing you about this community, and change not always being a good thing. Sometimes doing it the traditional way is actually the way that people have figured out. This is how you have to do it. Trying to change it is going to cause problems. And we see it happen. It's really quite tragic, because they do start losing people.
But Vasya is the one who's single-handedly keeping the Domovoy still alive, offering the household spirits bread and everything against what Anna wants her to do, which, there's a kind of a oddly trinity or trifecta of whatever the word is, of Vasya, Anna, and Constantine. They're in this power struggle with each other, and they're all fighting for kind of the same thing in a way, which is, but they're still at odds with one another on so many levels. Poor Anna is.
I just felt so bad for her.
I actually I've wanted to do like a, I don't know, some sort of weird thesis statement in my delusionary like academic
Totally do that.
Whatever, is that scene where she's with Constantine, which, by the way, I've already abandoned my poor attempts at like structure. I'm just
we're just going to touch on whatever comes up.
Yeah, whatever. But that scene where she tells Constantine, I want you to see me. I want you to look at me the way that you look at Vasya.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, that, like, I'm not gonna, that's sinful, that's craving, that's, basically taking it as a sexual thing. And
yeah,
no, I didn't mean that. But
she kind of did.
It's a desire. She wants to be seen, because she is given that, she feels like she has power over herself by being seen, because she's not getting that with Piotr. So
no, because she's always the fill-in person. She's there to be your wife. She's not there because Piotr wanted her. She's there because he wanted a wife, and she knows that her family foisted her on this man, and so she was never chosen as a wife. And she I mean, we hear quite directly from Piotr, she wasn't into marital activities. So she doesn't feel wanted at all, to the point where she can pour herself into this life. So she's always very removed from it, and she just needs somebody to see her and bring her into this world, because none of them do. None of them look at her and see Anna. They look at her and see the stepmother, the wife, and eventually as the mother of the younger daughter. But she's just very removed from, I mean, she's done it to herself to some degree, because she's kept all of these secrets. I mean, if she'd arrived and gone, there's a thing in the hearth, because the domovoi lives in the hearth, if she'd said that, people would have gone, oh, awesome. Can you tell us when he's not happy? Because we need to keep him happy. Things could have been incredibly different for her, but she didn't. She kept those secrets, and she kept that part of herself hidden and ashamed and
fearful.
And she was fearful. And it all kind of feeds really beautifully in the themes. And the fact that this is a debut novel blows me away. And I'm so excited to go further into the series, because, traditionally authors get better. So I'm thrilled knowing this is a starting point. I'm like, loving it. Because, it was also, the characters are really well formed. I mean, for a fairy tale, they're never well formed.
Yeah,
fairy tales are pretty cut and dry.
So I really like the aspect of Anna being that wicked stepmother, but she's not truly she's not wicked at all. She's
really well intentioned. Like, she genuinely thinks that she's trying to save these people's souls. Mm-hmm. She's really working hard to try and save them from these demons and devils, not understanding that this is a fundamental part of their livelihood, existence, and the fear of them, and the increased fear of them when Constantine becomes the leader of that flock, causing the reduction of power in these household spirits, was really sad to watch. And we see that only Vasya can see them dwindling, and does her best to make sure she's making offerings, to the point that when they're really weak, she actually starts giving them her blood, because, well, for a start, her blood's magical, so it's got a little bit more power than other people's. But she knows the importance of them. Where they're dwindling around other people's homes, their fires are burning wrong, which sounds like a strange sentiment, but anyone who's had a wood fire knows that sometimes you put fuel on the fire and it just burns really hot and really fast and then goes out. Other times you can feed a fire and it's just beautiful, lovely, warm heat for the rest of the night. All of their fires are burning through their fuel. They're not generating long-term warmth. So it's hurting them that these domovoi aren't being sustained. You've got your favourite little household spirit, the Vasia, in the stables, who look after the horses and keep the animals calm. Because it's winter. It's winter next to the forests in Russia. There are wolves, there are bears, there are creatures out there that will eat livestock. So if they're not kept calm, they're going to injure themselves. They're going to break out. They're more prone to be attacked by animals. But if they're kept calm and they're kept in the stable and they're lovely and calm, everybody's animals are better off. So when those spirits begin to dwindle, we see people's flocks and herds dwindling. And all of this comes back to that fear. And their lives are dwindling as a result. It's so incredibly well done, how interwoven it all is with actual life. If you were living in a winter landscape on the borders of a forest in the north of Russia, this is not, I'm going skiing cold. This is, I spend 5 minutes outside, I'm dead cold.
Yeah. And there's also the added feeling of resentment around everybody.
Oh, yeah.
Pyotr resents his cousin for thrusting Anna on him. He resents Anna in a way for not being the wife he expected. Anna resents Vasya for, Konstantin and Anna resent Vasya for the level of independence that she exerts by resisting the power and the control that they're both trying to kind of thrust upon her. The biggest thing is just Anna and Vasya are parallels of each other, where poor Anna wanted to go to the church. She wanted to stay in the church. She wanted to stay safe because she couldn't see, like in the church, she couldn't see the thing. She was safe. She was comfortable. She didn't feel fear.
No.
But then you have this her I could just imagine, like, my stepdaughter has the same exact affliction, but she's thriving.
Yeah, and that thriving offends them on some level.
And then on top of that, in order to control her, she has to try and make her do the thing that Anna herself wanted, which is sending her to the church.
Yeah.
And it's just so...
And she doesn't want it.
It's so hard.
My stepdaughter's going to get the thing that I wanted, and she doesn't even want it. Yeah. How dare she? Yeah. And I very much see, and you see it in Konstantin, because he does become very obsessed with Vasya, and she is flourishing. She is flourishing by accepting that, no, these things are real, and I'm simply refusing to conform. I'm not going to conform. I'm going to be me. And because she's able to do that, she is beautiful in spirit. And that kind of shines through her. And Konstantin sees it. And as a man is very attracted to that. As a priest, he's very offended by it because she's not subservient and she's not obedient and she's none of the things that he expects a woman to be. So he's both attracted to and offended by Vasya. And so his treatment of her can be very cruel. And we see that obsession grow in him throughout the book. But her acceptance of herself is wonderful to see. It really is wonderful because it's rare. It's rare in any kind of story for a young woman to be able to do stuff, to want to do stuff, to feel like she has agency to do stuff. And Vasya has simply grown up with it. Just gone, no, I'm going to do what I want to do. And she does.
Yeah, this is one of those few books, or probably honestly the first time that I ever consciously read a book where the main character, particularly the female main character, is the one that doesn't change. Normally, you would expect a character to have an arc, to change, to have growth throughout. Vasya doesn't change. She knows herself, and she's confident, and she's consistent throughout.
She really is.
It is everyone else around her that is, their perceptions change, their uncertainties are on display. That's where the kind of the shifting sands are in a weird way. To kind of, speaking of shifting, that was not planned. That word,
we'll take it.
We've talked about like the religious, the kind of what is it?
The control,
the historicity side of things. Let's talk about the magical stuff, the actual magical stuff.
Yeah.
Were you as surprised as I was at how dark it got, especially with the vampire-like creatures?
I wasn't, but I'm a person who always leaned toward really old fairy tales, which have always been dark, which have always been about a sacrifice of blood, which have always been about understanding that death sometimes isn't permanent, that if the magic forces that be aren't good, you're going to get remnants, you're going to get revenants. So none of that came as a surprise so much as I appreciated how smoothly it led into the story. Because, as I say, I like the really old fairy tales. I like the way they are they are really dark. Quite often a fairy tale ends with death. Like, it's not a happy ever after. Sorry, Mr. Disney, that's not how they go.
The Little Mermaid committed suicide. Spoiler.
And even before that, the Little Mermaid was in pain every single moment she had legs. Anyway, that's beside the point. The concept of fairy tales were, in the same way as the church were, they were stories to explain why you behave the way you do. This is acceptable, this is not. And before the church took over worldwide, this was told by fairy tales, and the fairy tales differed by area because the rules were different. Mm-hmm. You can't do these things in northern Russia and expect to survive. So your fairy tales were about, don't be thinking you can go into the woods in the middle of winter and come back with a prince's ransom. That only happens once in a blue moon to a very special chosen few. Most people are going to die horribly. That's the point of the fairy tale that we're getting at the very beginning of the story. Mm-hmm. So on a real world level, we're getting the truth of this was the fairy tale. And the point of that was, don't be going into the woods or you'll die. And we get the magical part of the fairy tale, which is that once in a lifetime person who does meet the Winter King, who is respected by the Winter King and could call on a prince's ransom. And I just really loved that because I like I said, I love old fairy tales. I love what it's teaching you about the way people interacted with their world. And I'm not as familiar with Russian fairy tales and folk tales. So I loved that aspect of this. I really did. It was great.
So Morosko then.
Yes. He's marvelous. I really, really loved that because it was this, again, fear. You have to have a respectful fear of winter. But it's also a sort of love where they can, as a fairy tale, he's cruel. He's not even wicked, but he's cruel. He's harsh. Winter is harsh. But if you treat winter with respect, if you treat winter with courage, you can survive. So you get that, again, thank you, Terry Pratchett, the anthropomorphic personification of that is to deal with him as a person. If you deal with him with courage, if you deal with him fearlessly, but not stupidly fearlessly. Like go in knowing he could kill me. So if you're respectful with that courage, you will be rewarded. And we see that when Vasea does start having interaction one-on-one, because she treats him with respect and refuses to be frightened for no reason of him. He shows her respect. And I mean, she even says to him, you could kill me. You know, you nearly did kill me. Yes, I'm frightened. And he acknowledges that, yeah, that's how it's supposed to be. And I just really loved that, because that's the point of these fairy tales. That's the point of the personification of these characters, is to give you a voice of that force back. And to be, what should you be frightened of in winter? Fear. Because if you're frightened for no reason, you're going to make bad decisions. You're going to be more likely to die. And so for the enemy of winter to be fear, or to be fueled by fear, you know, the bear, the thing you're frightened of, I love how it works with the human psyche. That makes sense to me. That makes perfect sense to me.
The fear of the unknown is often the worser fear than fear of drowning or fear of burning. You can take steps to protect yourself from this fear by learning how to swim, or you know, stop, drop, and roll. You know,
pretty much. And so for fire safety, the bear, this most frightening of predators in winter, who can destroy entire villages in the minds of people, because let's face it, this is all about people, was fascinating to me. Because yes, bears are frightening, and yes, bears do a lot of damage, and yes, bears can kill a lot and eat a lot. They're still only going to eat as much as a bear can eat. So learn about the bear. Know when it's going to go into hibernation. Learn what defenses your village needs to protect it from bears. Controlling that fear, giving that fear boundaries of expectation, helps defeat that fear.
Speaking of control and power,
yes,
this is a good, an actual positive depiction of control and power. If you have control and power over yourself and of fear, it can be a positive thing. And control and power are not, it's who uses the power, who has the control.
Yeah. And Vasea is our person who says, look, yes, I'm frightened of you, Winter King. Yes, I'm frightened because you could kill me. But I know if I show courage, the fairy tales have told me, if I show courage, you will forgive me, that you will allow me to continue. And that controlling of fear is ultimately what's been keeping Medved under control over the years. They're controlling that fear by feeding the household spirits. Like, no, we can keep the bear at bay because we're giving offerings to the Domovoy and the Vasea. It'll come to me, the Vasela. And so they're controlling that fear. And only when they're deprived of those ways to control that fear, and they're simply frightened, does this omnipresent evil fear start oppressing them again. And I think that Katherine Arden did such an amazing job of keeping that balance, what I think to be exactly right, in how it meets the fairy tale, the reality, and the magic of it. I just loved that so much, because I see it. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense to me. It fits. It works. I'm okay with that.
He builds it to this. I wouldn't even say it's a crescendo. It's it kind of is a crescendo to the end of the book, where the end of the book is like 10 pages. Like all the action,
very fast.
Very fast. but holy crap, does it pack a punch. And
Oh, it does.
combines everything.
It does. But it also comes back to what I was saying earlier, that the old fairy tales, they don't end with a happy ever after.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't. In this instance, because it's been allowed to crescendo to this point, it takes an extreme blood sacrifice, in that we do see a willingness to sacrifice self to death. And any winter fairy tales of the ones I know from Europe quite often depend on a bloodshedding in winter, on a satiation of something in winter with blood. And to get that as the pinnacle of the story really satisfied my soul, because I'm like, no, that's the correct way for the story to go. That's the fairy tale beat that it needs. That it also worked in a factual, reality-based story just pleased me. It just made me happy. I was like, yes, that's how you do this. This is great. But so I appreciate how traditional the fairy tale part of the story was, all while covered with this very modern feeling story on top of it. That's a family story. That's about this, ugly duckling. That's got all of those elements. That's very modern fairy tale, but underneath it was this very traditional one being told, and they paralleled the whole way through. It was gorgeous. I loved it so much. I do want to touch on the conformity thing for Vasya, because we see the life that a normal young woman would go through with her sister Olga, and she was married off to a bloke she'd never even met, and yet, what did they call it? Fat and happy. She was fat and happy with many children, and completely happy in her lot. There was never a sense of resentment, of unwillingness. That was what she was going to do. She was going to grow up. Her father was going to arrange a marriage for her. She was going to go off and live with this bloke and have children. And she was completely accepting of that fate and happy about it. Vasya didn't want that. So her father didn't arrange that for her. He thought about it and was forced into it to some degree, and she managed to scupper that rather wonderfully by being fabulous. But there was never a sense of she was going to fall into that. Her father knew that's not going to go well. That's not going to go well. And that her ability, her strengths, put off the one prospective suitor sort of tells you everything you need to. She was never going to be accepted as a wife because she didn't want to be.
Independent. Yep.
Yeah, yep. She didn't want to be a wife. She didn't want to be somebody's bed warmer and a creator for children. That was never something she wanted to be. And the moment somebody from outside her village met her, he was like, no, that's going to be far too much trouble to handle. I want a woman that knows her place. And that's not to say that a woman's place was somehow less. Olga had a role as a woman, and she embraced that role.
And
which
again,
ultimately is her choice, and she was happy with that.
And again,
she was blessed for that.
It's about control.
Yeah.
Where what was his name? Vladimir? No. Whatever the guy's name was.
K.
Yeah. Something.
Yeah.
Either way.
Whatever is
that dude who was a douchebag.
Yeah, the douche.
Yeah. He wanted to control Vasya. Vasya was like,
yeah,
no. Whereas, if very much a slow burn attraction between Morosko and Vasya, there is like you said, there is a mutual respect there.
Yeah.
There is no control over one or the other.
No, because Winter doesn't want control. As a season, winter is not a controlling season. Winter, you just have to accept that winter happens, and you've got to face that with courage. You've got to go into it with bravery, with courage, eyes wide open. And that's what we do when we meet the personification of winter. Winter is just there. That is who he is. He's going to be cruel if you don't treat him with respect. Treat him with respect, and he'll be completely generous. Whatever winter can give you, winter will give you if you treat it with respect. And that's exactly what we see with that personification. And I loved it. I loved it so very much. I loved the fact that with the douche, we learn very quickly he's a douche in the very traditional way that fairy tales tell us who the bad guy is, with how he treated his horse. And we know this because Vassia has the ability to talk to horses because she's been taught by all of the household spirits. And he's frightened, this horse, of his master. And he's amazing. I loved his horse. What's the word I'm looking for? The treatment that we see among the animals in winter. They're not frightened of winter. They respect winter. They try not to do anything stupid around winter because winter will kill them. But not because of cruelty or, well, yes, cruelty, but not because of maliciousness. It's not malicious. It's just harsh.
Yeah.
And that comes through, that maliciousness is different. Maliciousness, that intent to cause pain, that intent to be nasty, is different from simply being. Treat this with respect or you're gonna die.
As an extension of that, that is really displayed quite succinctly with Piotr
Yes.
and his when he beats Vasya.
Yes.
He beats her because he needs to.
Yeah.
Or
he feels he needs to.
Yeah, he feels he needs to. But then he beats her again later. And the context, the meaning,
yeah, they're different.
He's harsh in the first one because he needed to do
something that could have
cruel. He was cruel in the second one.
And he really regretted the second one. You see it in his almost instant remorse, where that was not okay. Whereas earlier, again, it's the kid with the hand on the oven kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's like, you don't want your child to do something permanently damaging to themselves. So historically, the reaction was you smack your child. Obviously, we don't do this now. But we also don't live around open fires now.
Yeah.
The danger is different.
Yeah.
So where the danger is deathly, a hiding perhaps would have been appropriate. Like, seriously, child, do not do that thing.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not endorsing beating your children. This is not okay. What I'm saying is that historically, I can understand why that was the way people who didn't know any better taught their children. So, believing he's doing it for good reasons meant that he could live with that earlier beating. Because the latter was vindictive, the latter was purely frustration, was nastiness. And for him to immediately feel remorse was appropriate. That she, I don't want to say accepted, but she allowed almost the second beating because this was her father, slightly bothered me, but that's a modern sensibility. Because, in those days, your father disciplined you however he chose. I liked seeing that it was a rarity from Piotr. and I liked seeing his regret when he knew he was in the wrong. And I just think Katherine Arden touches this very common thing with delicacy, because children did get their asses handed to them frequently.
Yeah.
Because that's just what happened.
But thematically, my intention with all of that is, again, I also agree, you should not beat your kids. But thematically, it's just, everything is just building into this like thematic exploration of control and power and trust and all of it. It's just so oh god, it's so good.
No, it is. And again, with the control, again, the earlier beating was about the control of teaching your child, this is how you behave.
The control was based
had no control element except for cruelty.
Yeah,
because she was frustrated that she wasn't doing what he wanted her to do.
Well, the first one, I would say, is the control is based in protecting her.
Yeah.
The second one is control based in, you didn't do what I wanted you to do.
It was frustration rather than a believed teaching experience.
But we're a little over an hour, so did you feel any satisfaction or contentment with how things ended, particularly maybe with Constantine?
I think that I would be perfectly happy if this had been the only book Katherine Arden had ever written. Like, no, this is a fairy tale. This ends how a fairy tale ends. But it's also a reality story in that these characters exist in a real world. So for it to continue, I'm more than happy to be going into the next story. And I would, if you hadn't just said Constantine, I would be looking for ties to Bear and the Nightingale. So, because obviously, well, I say obviously, I'm assuming there would be, because we're getting this through line of Marina and her grandmother and now her daughter. This is clearly the line of magic that is connected to Winter. Whether that we then see that this line is sort of in Anna's line, because she could see the demons. Like, clearly this is not a rare, well, maybe it is rare, but it's not a unique magic. There's enough magic in the world to sort of permeate through other things. But I will definitely be looking to see some kind of connection into Bear the Nightingale.
Because, to reset your expectations, I was only asking particularly about Constantine because he just kind of like, it's like, last day is go away and never come back. And that's a very much a fairy tale-esque thing of like, leave our town, never come back. If you come back...
I actually did see some closure for Constantine, because he recognized that what had fed him wasn't God. When he made that connection, he felt deeply ashamed and he felt deeply betrayed by that power. And I felt that he, not necessarily a redemption arc for him, but certainly he came to closure on it, where I was like, okay, he's not going to fall prey to that again, because he's seen that fear as a really negative thing. Whether he goes on to continue to paint religious icons and become a force for good, who knows? But I did feel a sense of acceptance, of closure, of going, oh, okay, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. You go and fix the thing that you always knew how to fix. That's fine. I'll stop interfering. That's the sense I got from Constantine's arc.
All right. So, with it ending pretty well, being able to stand on its own, I just want to talk about the thing that I always want to talk about when I talk about Winternight trilogy, and it's being Solovey's biggest fan.
I loved him. He was
How wonderful. Did you love Solovey?
so much. To be fair, I loved all of the horses that we met in the story. I loved that she was taught to ride by the stable spirit. I loved that it gave her the horse whisperer aspect where she could communicate with them. I loved that the horses taught her to ride, that she rode with the horse, not as a person on a saddle. I love that she was able then, with Solovey's company, to be like she's not separate to him as a horse and a rider, that together they're a unit and together they go somewhere, do things. And there's an element of, I want to say, magic to that connection. And we see again in a lot of old fairy tales, that connection between a person and their mount was really important, that they understood each other. And so to get that is so satisfying for me to know, because I had never seen a connection with the Nightingale and this winter horse as being so direct. That was wonderful, that this idea of flight in form of a horse was just, I loved that so much, because it is used in language around horses, swift, and that you do fly. It's a flight on a horse. That sense of ultimate freedom that you have with birds, and that the horse simply chose at the moment to be a horse. This was the shape he needs to be right now. I loved that. It brought me an element that I'm not familiar with in fairy tales, but felt so right. Like, yeah, it feels right. And I loved it. It was so good.
And he's he's a personality. He's a cult. So
he is. And youth, yes, he did feel very young. Like he felt like a new thing. Yeah. And one of those old but wise kind of tropes, that this whole, rebirthed creature, this new for this time, but is also the one that was here last time. I liked that sense of renewal, which feeds into the point of a winter fairy tale. Winter is a point that doesn't stay. It's a cycle. And that's the point of why you face winter with courage, because then you get through winter and you get to see spring and summer. And winter is still coming. Hey, to quote Game of Thrones, winter is coming. So you have to treat it always, even in the middle of summer. You have to be aware of winter. Mm-hmm. You've got to be preparing for winter the whole year, because that's the thing you're facing every year. So this idea of renewal, and the story will repeat, and the reasons why we have to live the way we do, all of it tied together so seamlessly. I am in awe of the way Katherine Arden did it. That is just exactly what I wanted. It was so good, Evie. So good. Thank you so much for bringing the story to me.
I will just say I am pleased. So, yeah. So we definitely, even if I have to strong arm you into it, I have to fly to New Zealand to get you to do it. We will do a discussion of the second book.
Which is currently sitting next to my bed, because I will be starting it very shortly, because it's so, I just loved Bear and the Nightingale so much. Like I don't imagine it will take me long to get through the next two as well, because I'm going to have to add it to my rotation of stuff that I just always reread. So
this makes me so happy. I'm so excited.
Yeah, so it means that ultimately there will always be one of us reading one of the books that we love. At least. Yeah.
I'm just so glad that I can repay everything that you've done for us. I'm going to name myself the Queen of Winternight trilogy, because...
Absolutely.
Yeah, there you go. There you
Absolutely.
go. Taking that name for
The
myself.
Winternight Queen. I like it.
Anyways,
But
yeah.
yes.
So all joking aside, I'm so glad that you like it.
I was so relieved that I loved it, because I can't not love this. I will break Evie's heart if I don't love this. So the fact that I could honestly be voxering you at 2:45 in the morning going, oh my God, Evie, this is amazing.
And that you finished it in like basically 24 hours. You're like,
I did. I loved it. I loved it so much. I felt so relieved. I was like, oh, thank goodness. Because I trust you, and I trusted you, and I was like, no, I'm pretty sure I will at least like this.
Yeah, that was my hope. I'm like, please at least like it. Please at least like it. So
so yes, I did. I did very much at least like it.
Yeah. Yay. All right. So folks, be on the lookout for that. Or if it's future time frame from right now.
Check out the next discussion.
The video will be linked down below. Yeah, I'm so excited. And if you've read, well, I would hope that you've read the Bear and the Nightingale and/or the Winternight trilogy entirely. If you've gotten to this point, because we've spoiled some major stuff for you. But definitely let us know if you've read it, how you've enjoyed it. Good.
It's also a fairy tale, so there's an element really of it's not spoilable.
Yeah, true.
So but yeah.
So I'm so happy. Anyway, yes. Be on the lookout for the next discussion with Derri. And yay! Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and broadcast, and I don't know how to. Oh! I never said this. Oh my God! But at the beginning. Oh, dear God! All right, Derri's been on my channel enough. Y'all should know. Y'all should already be subscribed. But if you're not, for God's sake, subscribe to Derri. She talks about Discworld.
I do.
Realm of the Elderlanes, and now newly edition Winternight trilogy is going to be as part of that. Derri's read it before. I
am also going to add the Daughter of the Empire trilogy that you are going to start any moment now.
Yes.
Because we're reading that with Alan for the first time. And I have just finished my first reread. Not my first reread. My reread of the first book of the trilogy again for the umpteenth time, because I get to be the veteran again for this trilogy.
But we're just going to tennis court it.
Yeah. Ball your favorite series, my favorite series. And yeah, absolutely. Hopefully bringing everybody joy in books, because that's ultimately what we want to do, isn't it? I love it. I hope you love it.
And then just
and then the dread.
Oh God. Yeah.
So yeah.
Anyways, I don't know how to sign off on these things.
That's all right. I go. I'm gonna love you and leave you. So
I'm just gonna
wave, smile and wave.
Smile and wave, boys. Smile and wave.
Yeah. Got to do the royal wave as well.